I used to believe that if you worked hard enough, people would notice. Not eventually. Not after years of proving yourself. I mean naturally. The way a good product sells itself. The way a strong performance earns applause. The way effort and results are supposed to connect. Maybe that sounds naive now. But for a lot of us growing up in the 70s and 80s, that idea wasn't just a workplace strategy. It was a life philosophy. Do your job. Don't complain. Don't brag. Produce results. And when the time comes, somebody will recognize your value. If this story felt familiar, you're not alone. Share it with someone who spent years believing hard work was enough. And subscribe for more honest reflections on work, life, and the lessons nobody teaches until you've lived them. Keep your head down. That was the deal we thought we were making. The problem is that many of us entered the corporate world and discovered nobody else had signed that agreement. I remember my first real office job. Nothing glamorous. Gray cubicles. Fluorescent lights. Coffee that somehow tasted burnt and watered down at the same time. I wasn't trying to become a vice president. I wasn't trying to build a personal brand. I just wanted to be dependable. The kind of employee managers didn't have to worry about. If there was extra work, I took it. If a deadline was tight, I stayed late. If something went wrong, I fixed it. And honestly, for a while, it felt like the right approach. Managers praised my work. Coworkers trusted me. People came to me when they needed answers. I thought I was building a reputation. And I was. Just not the reputation I thought. Because after a few years, something strange started happening. The people getting promoted weren't always the people producing the best work. Sometimes they were. But often they weren't. The promotions seemed to go toward people who were visible. People who knew how to talk about their accomplishments. People who spent time building relationships with leadership. People who understood the social structure of the company. At first, I told myself it was a coincidence. Then I told myself it was unfair. Eventually, I realized it was reality. The hardest worker in the room wasn't automatically the most influential person in the room. And influence mattered. A lot. I remember one particular coworker. Let's call him David. David wasn't lazy. That's not the story. In fact, he was pretty competent. But what separated him from the rest of us wasn't his work. It was his awareness. He knew who made decisions. He knew which projects attracted attention. He knew when to speak in meetings. He knew when to stay quiet. He understood something I didn't. Organizations are made of people, not spreadsheets. And people don't evaluate everything objectively. They evaluate based on relationships, impressions, trust, familiarity, and perception. Meanwhile, I was sitting at my desk believing the numbers would speak for themselves. The numbers never learned how to speak. David became a manager. Then a director. And while I was wondering how it happened, he was probably wondering why it took me so long to figure it out. The uncomfortable truth is that office politics isn't always what we think it is. When people hear the phrase, they imagine manipulation. Backstabbing. Favoritism. Secret alliances. And yes, those things exist. Every workplace has its share of nonsense. But most office politics is much more ordinary than that. It's understanding who influences decisions. It's building relationships before you need them. It's communicating your contributions. It's making sure people know what you're working on. It's learning that visibility and value are not the same thing. But visibility often determines who gets opportunities. That realization was difficult for a lot of Gen X workers. Because many of us were raised to view self-promotion as arrogance. You weren't supposed to talk about your achievements. You were supposed to let other people discover them. If you advertised your own success, it felt like bragging. So we waited. We assumed somebody was paying attention. Sometimes they were. Often they weren't. One lesson took me years to learn. Being good at your job and being known for being good at your job are two completely different skills. I wish someone had explained that earlier. Not because I wanted fame. Not because I wanted attention. But because careers are built on recognition. And recognition doesn't happen automatically. I think that's where a lot of Gen X frustration came from. We weren't angry because we had to work hard. Hard work never scared us. We were angry because we believed hard work was enough. We followed the rules we were given. Then we watched the rules change. Or maybe the rules were never what we thought they were. I remember sitting through performance reviews that felt almost surreal. Managers would praise my reliability. Praise my technical knowledge. Praise my commitment. Then they would explain why someone else was moving ahead. The explanation was usually vague. Leadership potential. Strategic visibility. Executive presence. Cross-functional relationships. At the time, those phrases sounded like corporate nonsense. Now I understand what they meant. Those were simply polite ways of describing influence. And influence is often what separates contributors from decision-makers. The funny thing is that nobody teaches this when you're young. People teach you how to work. They don't teach you how organizations work. Those are very different subjects. One is about tasks. The other is about humans. And humans are messy. They have biases. Preferences. Assumptions. Friendships. Memories. Trust. No company chart can fully capture that reality. The older I got, the less angry I became. Not because I started loving office politics. I still don't. But I stopped viewing it as some evil force that existed outside the workplace. It's part of the workplace. Always has been. Probably always will be. The real mistake wasn't that office politics existed. The mistake was pretending it didn't. Because when you pretend it doesn't exist, you surrender the ability to navigate it. You become a passenger in a system everyone else is learning to drive. And that's a frustrating place to be. Especially when you're producing great work. I think many Gen X employees spent years trapped in that frustration. We watched people advance faster than us. We watched meetings where the best ideas didn't always win. We watched charisma outperform competence. At least temporarily. And we wondered what happened to merit. The answer, unfortunately, is that merit was only part of the equation. It always was. The workplace isn't a school. There isn't a teacher grading every assignment. There isn't a scoreboard showing who contributed the most. Most decisions happen with incomplete information. Which means perception fills the gaps. That's why relationships matter. That's why communication matters. That's why visibility matters. Not because performance is irrelevant. But because performance alone rarely tells the whole story. I learned that lesson later than I should have. Many of us did. And if I'm honest, I still feel a little conflicted about it. Part of me still wants to believe the old promise. Work hard. Do great work. Everything else will take care of itself. There's something comforting about that idea. Something fair. Something clean. But life rarely operates on clean rules. Neither do organizations. The older version of me understands that now. Hard work matters. Absolutely. Without competence, everything else eventually falls apart. But competence is only one ingredient. You also have to communicate. You have to build trust. You have to create connections. You have to understand the environment you're operating in. Not because you're playing a game. Because everyone else already is. And pretending the game doesn't exist doesn't exempt you from its consequences. If there's one thing many Gen X workers learned the hard way, it's this. The people who moved ahead weren't always smarter. They weren't always more talented. And they certainly weren't always working harder. They simply understood something we resisted for too long. Work speaks. But people interpret what it says. And the people doing the interpreting are influenced by far more than output alone. That realization can feel disappointing. Maybe even cynical. But it can also be freeing. Because once you understand the rules, you stop blaming yourself for every missed opportunity. You stop assuming your value is invisible because it doesn't exist. Sometimes it's invisible because nobody can see it. And visibility, whether we like it or not, is part of the job. Looking back, I don't regret being a hard worker. Not for a second. Hard work built my skills. It built my confidence. It built my character. What I regret is believing hard work and recognition were automatically connected. They aren't. Never were. The workplace taught me that lesson slowly. Sometimes painfully. But eventually, I learned it. Hard work speaks for itself. That's true. The problem is that office politics often has the microphone. And in most organizations, the microphone is what people hear. Thanks for spending these few minutes with me. If this reflection resonated with your own experience, please share it with someone who needs to hear it. And subscribe for more stories, insights, and lessons gathered from a lifetime of experience.